Hello, grade 10s, Mrs. Arobi here, and I'm going to walk you through a tutorial in the basics of sentence structure or syntax. We're observing that some of you have some sentence fragments or run-on sentences that are taking away from the clarity of your writing. And since we're working our way to the first essay in 10th grade English, we want to give you a chance to practice and review. So follow along with me, and after this tutorial, there will be a short quiz just to check your understanding. Here we go. All sentences require these basic building blocks. So every good sentence must have a subject, which is a noun, the thing or the person who is doing an action. It must have a verb, that's the action word. It needs an object, so the noun at which the action is directed, and then there's some other details. Very few sentences work with just the three words, although those are the essential basics. Every good sentence must have a subject and a verb and an object. Missing one of these pieces is what will result in a sentence fragment. So here's an example of a simple sentence with these blocks. My friend traveled to Bulgaria last summer. My friend is the subject, the verb is traveled, the object is Bulgaria, telling me where she traveled or he traveled, and in the summer or last summer are the details. Okay, so that's a simple sentence. We're in grade 10. Not all sentences are so simple, as you know. So there are three basic types of sentences that we will use. The simple sentence, which I just showed you. A compound sentence, which has two simple ideas joined by a conjunction. Something like and, but, so, or, nor, for. So two simple sentence ideas joined by that conjunction. And in that conjunction, sometimes we can have the subject for the first part be the subject implied for the second part too. So as long as in a compound sentence we have at least one subject, it's still okay. Here's an example of a compound sentence building off that first example. My friend traveled to Bulgaria last summer and visited Krishna waterfalls. Oops. All right, and the third type of sentence is a complex sentence. A complex sentence has two clauses, and they're going to be separated by a comma. They can go in either order. The independent clause is called that because it is essentially a simple sentence on its own. It works. And the dependent clause is the half of the sentence that would be a fragment if it wasn't buddied up with the independent clause. So here's an example of a complex sentence. Same thematic idea as the previous sentences. So when she was visiting Bulgaria, that would be the dependent clause. That actually isn't a complete sentence on its own. So when she was visiting Bulgaria, my friend met a special someone. Okay? So my friend met a special someone. We have subject, object, verb, and details. But when she was visiting Bulgaria, that when word means it has to be completed by something. What happened then? So we have this complex sentence with these two parts buddied up. Okay, so those are the three types of sentences we can have. All of them have those simple sentence basic foundations, and then compound and complex sentences build on that. All three types of sentences end in a period or a full stop. So knowing when an idea is complete is a challenge for some of you, because if we don't put the full stop where that complete idea is, then we end up with a run-on sentence. Okay, so here are a few basic rules for when to use a comma and when to use a period. Let's begin with the commas. So all of you by grade 10 know that commas separate dates from, like, it's September 29th, comma, 2021. That we know. We all know that commas separate items in a series. I'm not going to bother with those rules. The ones that I see forgotten are listed over here. So after a transition phrase, for example, subsequently, Okonkwo stayed alone in his obi. Subsequently is like an introducing, linking transition phrase. We need a comma following that. Around an appositive phrase, which is a fancy name for what I like to call a comma sandwich. That's why I put a little sandwich icon there. So when I have a simple sentence, but I want to insert an explanatory detail, this is where I need that comma sandwich. So here's an example to illustrate. Alex, a student in 10th grade, won the essay contest. I could just say Alex won the essay contest, but I'm afraid you don't know who Alex is. So I want to give you an explanation. That explanation needs to be sandwiched in between two commas on the side because I could pluck it out and make it a perfectly good sentence, but I want to add those details, commas on both sides. And finally, I've just explained the concept of a complex sentence. You need commas in between those two clauses. The comma needs to be there to separate those two ideas, the independent clause and the dependent clause. So here's another example to illustrate. Although he was young, Carlos was wise. Okay, so although he was young, sentence fragment on its own, but I'm giving some explanatory detail, even though it's just 3 words, that's a simple sentence idea or an independent clause. Carlos was wise. Okay, so those are the 3 places to review when to use a comma. Next, for periods. So periods are required at the end of a complete idea. It can be a simple, compound, or complex sentence, but it needs those basic components. A good rule for checking if you're going into run-on territory is whether you have more than 3 lines of typed text without a period. It's possible that that's a decent complete sentence, but very likely you're running into danger there. Okay, so we want to have more periods than commas in our compositions generally, because not every sentence requires a comma. All right, so here we go into the common sentence errors. A run-on sentence is something that when I read out loud, I'm running out of breath. So here is an example. While I was making dinner, I got distracted by my phone and the kitchen nearly caught fire and I had to call the fire department to put it out, and luckily the house didn't burn down. All those and should be a period. We should have this separated into at least 3 complete ideas. Helps it organize in your reader's mind. Sentence fragments, on the other hand, have the opposite problem. They're incomplete ideas, often starting with these words like when, although, while. So they create a dependent clause. It depends on the other part of the sentence. So it leaves me thinking like, so what? So while I was making dinner, then what? It's not done. I need to finish that idea. So let's be careful with that punctuation so that we don't run into these 2 problems. Fragments will either have one of those beginning words like when, although, if, and not be completed by an independent clause, or they'll be missing one of our essentials in a sentence, the subject, object, or verb. So here is a sentence. Because the weather was nice. It's missing a subject. What? Because the weather was nice. My favorite math teacher. That's missing a verb. What did your favorite math teacher do? Or what did you think about your favorite math teacher? Such as martial arts. This is giving an example, but what is such as martial arts? It's missing a subject again. Okay, so we need all of those components to make a complete sentence. Take a look at these and think for a moment. Which ones are sentence fragments? I see 3 of them. And I hope you see them too. Okay, so first, after Liana went to school, that's a fragment because we need that independent clause to complete this complex idea. After she went to school, what happened? This second one is okay, so is the third. Hope you are well is missing a subject. This is one I'm guilty of. In a quick wish or a text or even an email, they say, hey, hope you're doing all right. Well, who hopes? I hope. I could add that 1-letter word and it would be more correct. It's okay in informal conversation. It's just not okay in your academic writing. And the last one is also a fragment. When Val eats lunch, well, what happens when Val eats lunch? So again, it's got that clause word, and we need to complete this by making it a complex sentence. All right, so words to avoid when starting a sentence that's not a question, to try not to make it a fragment. So don't start a sentence with like or how, unless it's a question asking something how, whether, such as, and don't start with those clause words unless it's going to be a complex sentence like when, although, etc. Okay, so now let's look at run-on sentences. Pause for a moment and let you read these. Which ones don't have enough punctuation? So number 1 is a run-on sentence, and we could fix it by turning this comma into a period. Every summer my family enjoys a vacation, period. Sometimes we go to the beach in Vietnam, and other times we travel abroad. So that last part can be a compound sentence. Number 2 is okay. It's a fine sentence on its own. And let's look at number 3. This also has the comma splice issue. This is a run-on sentence. In the countryside, the view of the stars is stunning, period. They are much brighter than in the city, period. Okay, so if we turned this comma after stunning into a period, we would have 2 correct complete sentences. So this one, I want you to think on for a moment too. Where would we put the periods? Okay, and you can pause it if you need longer, but I'm going to move on and share the answers with you. Okay, so here we go. Achebe shows the importance of masculinity and toughness in the Igbo culture, period. In chapter 7, comma, the village orders Ikemefuna to be killed, period. Although Okonkwo has raised him for 3 years like a son, he proves his masculinity by slaughtering the child himself, period. The act clearly disturbs him. We could have a comma here too. However, he will not be seen as weak and follows Igbo expectations beyond reasonable limits. All right, so we're going to now get into a little quiz for you to review your understanding. I hope that helps you a little bit with understanding where punctuation should go and how to write a clearer sentence. Thanks. Bye.